depending where you are. Thank you, Benjamin. So my name is Christina Schoenleber. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at APRU, and I'm very, very pleased to welcome you all for this inaugural session of the APRU Biodiversity for Sustainable Cities webinar series. And the session today has the title Urban Landscapes, Biodiversity Conservation and Practice, Framework, Assessment and Design. And before we kick off, I would like to really, really briefly give you a little information about APRU. Some of you may not be aware what we do. And for this, I will pull up my screen. Okay. Okay. So APRU, or the Association of Pacific Rim Universities, we're around 60 leading research universities in 20 economies, all based around the Asia Pacific. We were set up over 25 years ago with the main objective really to provide a platform for universities around the Asia Pacific to work together through the science that they develop, through the research that they do, to support governments and other organizations in the region in developing and advancing solutions for pressing issues of the region. So our focus is to achieve impact on regional issues, which 25 years ago arguably were different than they are now today. But it is also quite obvious that the issues that we are addressing are not just regional but global, but we look at it with a regional lens. And you can see on my slide here that we have many of the leading universities that are based around the Ring of Fire, around the Pacific Ocean, and where they're based. And we really work on key issues with many global partners in the region. And you can see on the slide some of the logos of the partners, which can be UN agencies. It is the ADB. We work very closely with APEC. APRU are guest member of some of the working group of the APEC Economic or Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, and supports their work through working through some of the programs that we do. And the programs, let me move on. So, the programs that very specifically look at the regional problems that we would like to support solve are, as you can see on the screens, for example, global health, multi-hazards, biodiversity, digital economy, sustainable citizen landscape, and sustainable waste management. And by drawing on the research expertise and the academic community and the students within our members, we can actually advance and work on many of the SDGs, which is one of our main focus areas, to help address and advance some of these. And we bring along with this, through our members, a considerable research expertise, and also the partners that we bring along within our programs, because the programs are not just working only with the member institutions within our network, but also with external partners, with academics of other universities that want to work with us and have a regional focus and expertise in the areas that we're looking at. So we have two programs, the biodiversity program, the APRU Biodiversity program, and the APRU Sustainable Cities and Landscape program, that have collaborated and collaborating closely on areas of interest. And many other, I have to say, other programs are overlapping on areas, but here we specifically are looking at urban biodiversity. So I'd like to really briefly introduce why or the thinking behind putting this webinar series together. And as you can see, we've been thinking in both our programs, or in many, actually, also many meetings that we have, about the human impact on the environment and what it is causing. And it's causing a crisis of biodiversity loss, as we all know. And especially places like cities face greatest challenges in residing biodiversity loss. So the webinar series is a starting point to help identify how experts and scientists focusing on human development and biodiversity conservation can work together to advance urban sustainable development and combat biodiversity loss. The APRU Biodiversity and the APRU Sustainable Cities and Landscape programs jointly provide an ideal platform, we believe, for APRU researchers, scientists, and practitioners also across the region and across related disciplines to come together and discuss how to allow human development and biodiversity conservation to go hand in hand. So the format that we've come up with is to look to put together a series of up to 6 webinars that will be running monthly with experts from around 2 or more universities to present per webinar on their own research. And we hope that the participants that are joining today will ideally aim to join multiple webinar sessions to help develop the areas of discussions. So we really are looking for presentations, but then also interactive discussions. So please engage in discussion to make the sessions as interactive and informative as possible. And please also share the details of the series with colleagues that you may think are interested in engaging in such a series. And then we will, as next steps, we will determine the degree of interest to develop this into an impactful collaborative network of like-minded academics, and maybe assess the capacity needs that have been identified within the discussions, but also other areas of mutual interest that may lead to research areas, but also to areas of collaborations to advance some of those gaps that may have been identified. So coming to let me just stop sharing here. Coming to a close of my little introduction, I really would like, before I hand over and to start this series in earnest, I really would like to thank, first of all, Professor Chen of the Chinese University of Hong Kong and co-director of the APRU Biodiversity Program, as well as Professor Fei Mo from Shanghai Tong University, and also APRU Sustainable Cities and Landscapes Biodiversity Working Group lead, who have worked as the lead academics tirelessly to put this webinar series together. It's taken a while to really come and think about how we can bring those academics that think about biodiversity from completely different angles together to actually allow them to discuss in a meaningful way. And also, I would like to highlight that colleagues have been supported by Nathan Lowe from the University of Sydney, also co-director of the APRU Biodiversity Program. But with that little thank you, I would like to now introduce the 2 moderators of the sessions today. So we first have Professor Fei Mo from the Department of Landscape Architecture at Shanghai Tong University, and also a member of the APRU Sustainable Cities Advisory Group, as well as the lead of the Sustainable Cities and Biodiversity Working Group. And the second moderator today is Professor Ming from the School of Ecology from Yat-sen University, and also a member of the advisory board of the APRU Biodiversity Program. And both of those universities and all the other universities I've just mentioned are very highly membered of the APRU network. And with that, I thank you all. I wish you a very engaging discussion, and I will hand over to Fei Mo. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christina. Hi, everyone. This is Fei from Shanghai Jiao Tong University, but currently I am a visiting professor in the Department of Landscape Architecture in University of Washington in Seattle. So greeting from the Susalo Library in Seattle. It's my great honor and privilege to develop the webinar series with colleagues like Christina, Benjamin, Jerome, Nathan, and also Amy, Ying, so as Yekang, who is the director of the SAL program. So as we know, biodiversity enhancement cannot be achieved within one discipline. In the very beginning of the session, we invited Ms. Liang Guo, who is the Deputy Director of International Affairs of Shanghai Jiao University, to briefly introduce why our university would promote cross-disciplinary cooperation with APRU, the Chinese University of Hong Kong, and the University of Sydney to develop the webinar series. So let's welcome to Ms. Guo to deliver a brief introduction to our university strategy about this. Yeah, Ms. Guo, please.
Thank you, Dr. Mo, and many thanks to Christina as well for giving us a genuine overview of the larger program. And distinguished guests, dear colleagues and friends, it's great to see you all online at our first webinar series. As Morphe expressed that we're very happy that we could kick it off today. If I may remind you,
Is that so
maybe she's
yeah, I think the network,
network problem.
Okay, so in this case, maybe we just give Ms. Guo several seconds for relog in. But as requested by the organizer from the APRU headquarters, so everyone after Ms. Guo's brief talk, we would have a large group photo. So please turn on your camera if you can. After, yeah, I think Ms. Guo just log in again. Yes.
sorry.
That's fine.
It always happens. Sorry about this.
It's fine. Yeah.
It gives me great pleasure to join you today. Actually, I'm a strong believer of internationalization. And during the last couple of years, when we couldn't travel, we have developed these online sessions. And sometimes it's for scholarly academic exchanges. Sometimes it's for academic professional development dialogue. Such we have had with Sydney Uni in the 2020 or 2021. And so I'm really delighted that we could have this first session of the APRU Biodiversity for Sustainable Cities webinar series. Just now we mentioned that Mo has asked me to say a few words about how we value this. We've always been valuing the international collaboration and promoting high quality research, practice, and education, and to encourage dialogues across boundaries between different disciplines, cultures, and countries. And it has also been our long-term strategy and in our value to cultivate the global competence and leadership of faculties and students. And I believe that is also why our School of Design has been investing a lot, both professionally and also academically, into this program. And a lot of thank you to our School of Design, and also a lot of thank you to Dr. Morphe, who has been working on this. And last but not least, I would also like to thank the support we have had from APRU, the Secretariat, and all our collaborating professors and academics. So I won't occupy too much of the time. I think I would return it back to Morphe so that you would have a wonderful session as the first session. The last thing I thought I was going to mention was that we're celebrating our 128th birthday for the university yesterday. It's the 8th of April. And Morphe, you are still on the 8th of April today, I know. So congratulations, and I hope you would enjoy this lecture series. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Guo. It's a very special day for me from all aspects. So currently, we are going to moving from the introduction section to presentation section now. But please turn on your camera if you can, because we are going to have a large group photo together. Could you, if our audience can turn on video? Yes, that would be really appreciated. Please.
Yes, please. if you can
Yes,
turn on, switch on your video.
yeah, just several
Yeah, we'll just
seconds.
take a photo.
Yeah, it's for archive our activities. And also this is a
Thank
first
you,
session,
everyone.
which is a very significant memory for us. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so Benjamin, could you count and ask?
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure, since most people turn on, switch on the camera. Okay, let's say 3, 2, 1. Okay. One more, maybe raise your hand. Yeah. Yeah. One more. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Well, I
Let's
have a lot.
enjoy the webinar.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. All right. So now let's move to the presentation section. Our first speaker today is my colleague, Professor Ruishan Chen, who is also our Deputy Dean of Research in the School of Design, Shanghai Jiao Tong University. I would make a very brief introduction to Professor Chen's background first. Professor Chen is an expert of human-environmental interaction. He is a director of the Urban Climate Change Research Network East Asian Hub and has been involved in the assessment of land degradation and restoration and transformative change assessment of the International Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. Professor Chen has been working on land use change, urban disaster risk reduction, climate change, and coastal land reclamation. Recently, Professor Chen has been combining adaptation and mitigation measures through landscape architecture and nature-based solutions to achieve carbon neutral and resilient cities. He is working as a shepherd for UCCRN's climate change, COVID-19 and cities, and a lead author for nature-based solution in cities. So let's welcome Professor Chen to deliver his talk today. Professor Chen, yes.
Okay. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Yeah, it's fine.
Oh, yes,
Okay, just wait a minute.
clearly.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm Ruishan Tong from Shanghai Jiao Tong University. My topic today is It's okay. My topic today is urban biodiversity conservation in the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. When prepare these slides, my master student Rongfei from Shanghai Jiao Tong University, and also my colleague Lilin Yu from the nature conservation also helped a little bit. So today my framework is like the first part I will talk about the post-2020 framework. Maybe some of you not so familiar with this. And then I will talk about the urban biodiversity conservation initiatives in some cities, especially in Shanghai. We'll talk about what we have done in Shanghai. And finally, we talk a little bit about the urban biodiversity vision in the future. So for some of you, who are not so familiar with the biodiversity, I will talk a little bit about the history, of the biodiversity conservation, the correction in biodiversity, biological diversity adopting entered into force in December the 29th of 1993. Some of you may not know the history. And on the top 10, the COP10 of that, that was held in Japan. And at that time, the CBD, adopted a strategic plan for 2011 and 2020 at the HE biodiversity target, with around 20 target, of that. At that time, we have the vision, in 2020, we will live in harmony with nature. And also, to ask the countries to implement national biodiversity strategies and actions. But, after 10 years, we see, all of the targets, have very limited progress. So, for after 2020, we think we need a framework, we need a new framework, for the biodiversity conservation. around that time, you know, I think some of you understand around that time in 2019 in China, globally, you know, we started the IP-based assessment of global biodiversity from around 2015, and in 2019, you know, the assessment was comes out. From that assessment, we see, you know, the global biodiversity has a you know, not a very good situation. You know, we see a lot of species are in you know, this global biodiversity are still in decline, and also, you know, the global degradation of the land was still, you know, in not only in the indigenous people, for the indigenous people, but also for the global a lot of areas in the world that are still, you know, degraded. So that is a very big issue. Then, so, you know, at that time, the COP15 started the preparation of a post-2020 global biodiversity framework. And the COP15 was, you know, that was originally scheduled to take place in Kunming of China in 2020, but it was postponed because of COVID. And then, you know, the first part of the COP15 took place in virtual, you know, in 2021, and the second part was moved to Montreal, you know, from 5th to 17th of December 2020. And on that conference, you know, they adopted the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. And the main objectives of the framework is turn the biodiversity decline curve, you know, turn the biodiversity curve and to transition from net loss to a net gain of the global biodiversity. So you can see, you know, from all of these years, you know, the biodiversity they are declined globally, and we hope, you know, from 2020 with our global actions, the biodiversity can recover, you know, gradually in the world. So that is our vision. And then, you know, the global biodiversity framework have 21 targets to reach around 10 milestones in 2030, and aiming living in harmony with nature by 2050. You know, this is our vision, you know, and the vision is nearly the same, you know, with the HE target, but still, you know, we have more hopes, you know, for the future. And this is, so, you know, the post-2020 biodiversity framework will also called the 2050 vision and the 2030 mission. So you can see, you know, some of the targets are here, and this is you know, the four of the target of that. You know, the targets include 4 parts: the conserve biodiversity, avoid further degradation, safeguard the ecosystems, and also act in policies. You can see, you know, we have several policies that can help us to avoid the biodiversity degradation. And then, you know, we need to think about, you know, what we can do for, you know, for a lot of cities and other places. Most people, you know, may think cities have a, you know, most people may think, you know, the cities have a very low biodiversity, because, you know, you see the soils, you know, that was paved by the same cement, and also, you know, a lot of people was in the city, maybe that affect the biodiversity, but still, you know, world cities, you know, they only occupied around 2.5% of the world land area, but, you know, it overlaps with 36 biological or biodiversity hotspot, and also, you know, host 75% of the endangered animals. You know, so cities are critical, you know, for implementing the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. So we need, you know, the global biodiversity framework calls for nature positive urban actions. And this is also, you know, even in 2020, you know, the CBD adopted the plan of action on cities for biodiversity, you know, that is the 2011 to 2020 plan. within that, there's several key messages. First one, the rich biodiversity can exist in cities. And also urban ecosystem services and biodiversity contribute to climate change mitigation and also adaptation. So nowadays we talk about the carbon neutrality not only in cities, but also in other parts. But so we need to think about the urban ecosystems, that can help us to further carbon neutrality. Also, your cities offer unique opportunities for learning and education. A lot of people live in the cities, especially the kids, they can help us, the urban habitat and also the biodiversity can help, for learning and education, especially for the next generation. The cities, they provide the spaces, for the not only for the birds, but also below the ground we see a lot of micro organisms that exist in the city. So that way may affect our health if we don't have very good relationship with them. Cities are also, consume a lot of resources, within the cities, but also from nearby and faraway regions. We every day we eat the medicines and also the energies, the ornamental materials and the raw materials. They all come from, also, within the city, but also nearby and faraway regions. So urban areas, they can have a very big impact on the biodiversity. And so we need to think about, globally, what cities, can do, for the biodiversity conservation. Globally, there's a city with nature platform. Nowadays, with already 22 cities participated to report their actions and plans, for the urban nature conservation. And within that, we can see Berlin, that is a very early part of that. They has its urban nature pact from 2022. They from 2022 there was a monitoring system for the urban biodiversity. They also help the environmental education and participation in the diversity arena. And also a lot of business companies, they cooperate with the biodiversity conservation in the city area. And also, Singapore, I think a lot of you, know Singapore, as the city state also play high attention for its urban biodiversity. And they also find the importance of engaging cities in the post-2020 framework. It developed the Singapore Index on cities biodiversity, which had been endorsed by CBD and applied in many cities worldwide. I think you know that from this the index you will see the part where is the profile of the city. You can see about the location, the physical features of the city, and also the biodiversity features. And then the second part is about the summer of street, the street for the biodiversity, and also some functions, like the climate regulation, recreation services, So this can help the cities to document their biodiversity status and also find, what's the problem for their biodiversity. And now I would like to, talk more about, what we had done, in what Shanghai have done, in the past several years. In Shanghai, the nature conservancy, the Tien, working with the local communities. This is not the same with other cities, because other cities they mostly they work on the city level, but in Shanghai we work on the community level. We Shanghai initiated a habitat garden, that conserve the biodiversity at the community level. They work with the communities, to conserve the biodiversity. This is a very different approach, compared to the Berlin and the Singapore. Which you can understand, Singapore and Berlin, they are concerned with the biodiversity, in the urban planning. But in Shanghai, we concerned with the biodiversity from the bottom up, from the community level. It aims to build the nature habitat, with the communities. Always, the community garden, the habitat garden is always 300 square meters to 500 square meters big, and its functions, act as sport, step stools. We can see, in the urban area, there's a lot of big parks, but between the big parks, there's no step stools, for the birds and also for other species. So we actually, try to develop the step stools, for the birds, for the bees, and for other animals, to help them to live in the urban area. So this is around the layout of the habitat garden. You can understand, how it look like. Now there are around 22 habitat gardens in Chamonix district of Shanghai. And the habitat garden, that can provide many ecosystem services. It provides the habitat for urban biodiversity and also managed by the local community. You can see, the kids, they play in the habitat garden, and also the birds, in this picture, you can see, the birds also, they live in the habitat garden. And also, the community garden, the habitat garden, they help transfer the knowledge, related to the biodiversity conservation to the students, and also for the local people, that provide a place, for us to live harmonious with the nature. The habitat garden, can also be used as to study the wildlife. It has cameras, has videos and also voice records, that help us to know more about the urban diversity, to track the biodiversity, like birds, cats, how they, lived in the habitat garden, and also their behaviors in the habitat garden. That can help us, to understand and also to have some actions to, prevent some actions, like by the sometimes, the cats may eat some the birds, so we can some measures we take maybe can, prevent these kind of activities. There's a lot of initiatives from other cities. We can't mention all of that, so we may look at what kind of cities do we want in the future. So we know that in 2015, the more than 70% of the people that time will live in the cities. Especially, most of the people added in the following century, maybe from Asia, East Asia, Asia countries, and also in Africa. All these developing countries, the population increase will be happening in these cities, and also we need to think about the biodiversity, in these cities, in these developing countries. And what kind of nature do we want, in the cities? That depends how we think about, the nature and also the relationship with Earth. We see, we sometimes we think about the nature only for ourselves, or how the nature can provide the ecosystem services for Earth. Sometimes we also think as nature, we think about like the biodiversity, like the birds, what they want in the city. And also sometimes, we think the nature as a kind of country, so we need to think about what kind of or nature, we want in the cities in the future. We also need to take into account of biodiversity, in the urban design, not only urban design, but also in the community design, in future. So then, you know, especially, you know, for the developing areas, you know, the developed countries like in Africa, you know, we need to increase access to the green and the blue spaces, you know, in the urban areas, you know, not only for the global north, but also for the global south, you know, for these the cities in these countries. With the people, you know, in these cities, they need more, you know, they need more attention, you know, for the biodiversity. And we also need to transform our cities. You see, this way is, you know, one city in Germany in 1990s, you know, all the areas was paved, you know, the paved road. But in 2019, you know, all the road, you know, that was transferred, changed into the green spaces, and a lot of trees planted around the road before. You know, you can see, you know, with the big change, you know, the people can enjoy more green spaces, and also the biodiversity, you know, can also exist in this city. So we can see, you know, this thing that in the middle picture, that is a picture from the Bend area of Shanghai. You can see, you know, nowadays a lot of cars on the road, and also every day a lot of people there. So if we can, you know, someday maybe in 2015 or later, you know, if we can transform this area with, you know, more green areas, more maybe, you know, that good for not only good for the people, but also good for the nature. And also maybe we need some kind of a vertical green spaces, you know, that green infrastructures that help us to mitigate the climate change. So, you know, we need nature-based solutions, you know, for the future cities. And also, you know, what we think about it, as we talk about, you know, the vision about the future urban areas, we not only need to think about the people, you know, what we want the city, you know, we need more green spaces, we need more flowers, need more butterflies, or the biodiversity. But we also, you know, we need to think about the biodiversity itself, you know, what they need. You know, they need a whole chain of the, you know, the whole chain of the biodiversity. You know, they can have the predators, and also, you know, the green species, you know, the vegetation and others, you know, that is the biodiversity system, you know, that is the system. Okay, so that is all my presentation. Thank you, all of you. If you have any questions, we can talk, we can, you know, discuss after Andy have the presentation.
Yeah, so many thanks to Ruishan's presentation. Due to the limit of time, I will just hand over the moderator's role to Professor Tien. And after Andy Cole's presentation, we can have a discussion together. So Tien. Yes.
Hi.
Okay.
Hi everyone. Can people hear me?
Yeah.
Right. So good morning. Good morning here from Shenzhen. I'm from the first of all, I'm Tien from the School of Ecology at the Yat-sen University. I am a Singaporean. So thank you, Professor Ruishan, for highlighting the wonderful stuff that our country has done, has contributed to the whole process. So it is my honor today to introduce Professor Andy Cole. Professor Andy Cole is at the Department of Landscape Architecture over at the Penn State University in United States of America. So like me, Professor Cole is actually a trained, I would say a trained, you know, animal biologist, wildlife ecologist. But I think what is also interesting is, like me, we have sort of ventured into I guess applying what we learn as undergraduates to new areas or cross interdisciplinary areas, where we sort of apply what we learn to what is actually needed, for example, to make cities more sustainable. I work in the area of human behavior. He works in the area of trying to integrate ecology into architecture, into design. So much of what what he does, you could probably see in the slide. Without further ado, I would like to hand the mic over to Andy to give us to share his work with the audience. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody, and good morning from the night before over here in the eastern part of the United States. I'm about as far from the Pacific Rim as you can get in the east, at least of the United States, but I do appreciate the invitation to talk. We did have our very rare earthquake over here the other day, so I share a little bit of that with you guys. Let me share the screen here. Is that visible?
Yes, it
Okay.
looks good.
Thank you. I come from a very different perspective than what Professor Chen just gave you. I'm looking at things, in one of his slides, he talked about full recovery. Well, I'm looking at the point of, well, you can't really have full recovery unless you've got a place for the things to recover to. There has to be space for this to happen. And so what I'm going to walk you through here is a lot of very non-urban examples, because where I'm at in the state of Pennsylvania is not particularly urban. But the principles that I will get to, I hope, will make sense. And I tend to look at this as a bit of a word of caution. So take that as you will, and I'll go ahead and get underway. If it works here. Here we go. So I'm all about the data, and I have to admit, and I'm sure those of you in the audience with an ecological background understand that ecology is not a precise science in a lot of ways. I'm going to show you some difficulties in collecting the data, and then I'm going to show you these are very central Pennsylvania difficulties, and then I'm going to show you why this matters. At least I hope I can show you this. My point is to be cautious with the data as you try to improve conditions that impact biodiversity. So that's my goal. Let's see if I can pull it off here. So error abounds in field ecology. I'm a field ecologist. I don't do bench science. I am very jealous oftentimes of those who do bench science because they can control things better than I can. And those of us who publish in journals make things look very nice and easy and clean, but it's not. There's too many things that get in the way. So a few examples here. I did a project where I looked at wetland mitigation sites. These are sites that were created to make up for damage to natural wetlands somewhere else. And I looked at the files we had. This is a government permitted activity, and there has to be files on them. So I went and used the latitude and longitude, and oftentimes I wouldn't find anything at the site. There would be nothing there, or at least nothing aquatic. And then there are times when somebody's got a permit that shows up in somebody's backyard, which is, it's just not correct. So the data that we work with, even as we go from paper and pencil to more digital, is often suspect. It all depends on the accuracy of the data that gets put in. Getting to a site often is a problem. I hope I've given up being stupid in getting to my study sites. Pennsylvania is 4 seasons, so we have a lot of winter. We didn't much this past winter, but many years we have plenty of snow, and yet I tried to get to these sites in the winter. And my data recorders that were out there when I started doing this, I had to get to them or fairly regularly, or the data would wrap and I would lose information. So I finally decided that it wasn't worth my life to try to get the data point, and I live with holes in the data, and it's just the way it's not worth an accident or getting somebody hurt to get the data, and so the data are missing in in many places, and that's just something I have to live with. Also floods, when the snow melts, tend to move things around. Recorders that I thought I had in one spot get moved around to another spot, and some of them I've never found again. I don't know where they ended up. And it's nature. And then unexpected things like getting caught in thunderstorms, which is dangerous, avoiding tornadoes and hail, earthquakes. We had like I said, we just had a very rare one around here. They're not as big as you folks have to deal with by any means. I also worked with the US Army on one of their sites up in northern New York, north of Pennsylvania, and had to avoid, literally, these are true, tank fire, helicopter fire, and machine gun fire. These are things I hope nobody ever has to deal with when you get out, but there are, because I had to leave sites for all these reasons, not just the Army's things, there's holes in the data, and I can't control that. I put out a lot of recording equipment, and I put it in places where I hope nobody finds it, but I've had vandals, and I don't understand why people decide to do that, but they get vandalized. I'm in a very rural area where we have a lot of wildlife, including black bears. Black bears like plastic, apparently, so they would take down my recording equipment. I don't know why, but they'd chew on it. And then every now and then I'd be out in a farm field, and you just can't trust cows. They're nosy. And then there's other kinds of human intervention when you try to get your data. This happens to be an actual study site of mine in State College, where I'm at in central Pennsylvania. And unbeknownst to me, they would go out and mow down my sites. So not only would they mow down the plants I was trying to measure, they would mow down the flags that marked the site where I was trying to measure that plant data. And this was open to the public, and then you get trampling and all sorts of things. So as I'm beginning to repeat myself, there's holes in the data. And sometimes things just grow up between 1 year and the next, and I simply can't get to a site. I had somebody holding up that piece of equipment there in the background, but I have a site most recently where I literally could not get to where I was the year before unless I brought a chainsaw, because things had grown up so remarkably, and it was all thorny and things that scratch and hurt, and I just couldn't get to it, and missing data. Sites that I actually GPSed, I couldn't find again. And I don't know whether somebody took the instrumentation down, or whether this was a part of it. I would access this site by a road under construction, and they changed my access point. And so maybe I was misreading the GPS monitor or whatever, but I never did find two sites. And again, that stopped my data collection. And then there's things, I've lost data. This is a local animal called a woodchuck. It's a ground squirrel, about 20 pounds, or we put it in metric, about 10 kilos worth of small ground squirrel that then I had data stored in bags. I had vegetation stored in bags that I was going to assess until this creature found them and ate them as a snack. Then there's bear damage in that tree in the front, and bear damage on that recorder there on the right-hand side. I don't fault the animals. It's part of the cost of doing business out in the field. I do not understand the human side when I get vandals. Then if you're measuring soils, which I do a lot, we use the Munsell color system to decide whether these are hydric soils or wet soils. And you have to work these color charts, which is fine if you're not red-green colorblind. A lot of data gets taken using these charts, and about 1 out of 10 men anyway in the United States is colorblind, red-green colorblind, and there's no way that they can make an accurate measurement here, yet we do. And then data management. Once you have the data in hand, you've collected whatever plant data, this is plant data, you have to enter it into a spreadsheet to do the analysis. And if you're not having the same person do the data entry, this is what happens. The Echinocloa cruscali, it's all the same plant there, but these are all different codes people have entered in to analyze it. So there's, I don't know, 10 or 12 there. For common chickweed, you can see it's even more. And then common plantain, even worse. And then one of the ryegrasses, not quite so bad. But these are all different ways of entering the same data. When it comes to analysis, it makes it really tough if these don't agree. And you have to have some quality control in your data entry. And I've faced this kind of problem before. And sometimes I make the wrong entry. It's really hard. We are entering spring here, as I imagine many of you are in the northern hemispheres anyway. And things are beginning to pop out of the ground. And if I have to collect data at this time of the year, the best I can do is say it's a small green thing. I don't know what it is, so I'm restricted until they get big enough, which usually means for me, I collect data late in May for the spring vegetation, and then I collect data in late September for the fall vegetation. But anything other than that becomes really hard to identify, and a lot of guesses, at least for me. I'm not a trained botanist. And then there's just unusual, unexpected things. I don't run into alligators. I know friends who do. You go to a site and there's 10,000 snow geese. That'll ruin your data. We had these rare birds show up. It's a very bad picture, but those are cranes that we don't ever see in Pennsylvania, but they showed up one winter and there they were. That'll change your data set. And then this is just one of my old water level recorders that I opened up, and ants had chewed through part of the plastic, and there was an ant nest in there and ruined the data recorder. That's one I did not expect. And again, all these lead to holes in your data or very strange data as a result of the cranes. And then a site that the water level had never been more than about 3 inches. We get this. Right, so very, very variable data. One of the things, I take a lot of water data, and one of the things that I have come to understand is that if I want to know what the long-term behavior of a lot of data is, 1 or 2 years is not going to do it. I have data sets, at least I had data sets before these all failed, of 10 to 12 years, and sometimes that wasn't even enough. So, all that being said, I want to walk you through the assessment part of this, because it's my opinion, and there are people who will disagree with me, but it's my opinion that we have issues with how we do site assessment, especially as it relates to quality of the habitat, which is what you need for biodiversity. You want as much quality habitat as you can. It doesn't matter whether you're in central Pennsylvania in a rural area, or if you're in, to take 2 cities in Pennsylvania, whether you're in Pittsburgh or Philadelphia or Beijing or wherever you are, you still need to do an accurate assessment. So this is Pennsylvania, eastern United States. Like I said, we're a long way from the Pacific Rim. And I'm going to work through, this is our wetland related thing. These are my examples, but I hope the points are well taken. So this is based on a US law called the Clean Water Act. And 1972, they want to maintain the chemical, physical, and biological integrity of the nation's waters. That's the law. Because wetlands fall under cleaning the nation's waters, this is how wetlands are legally regulated in the United States. So that's where the wetland connection comes in. So the Clean Water Act refers to biological integrity. And it has come down now through court cases and other regulations that this includes not only the acreage or the in metric terms, the hectareage, I guess would be the word, but it's area and function. It's not just area, which led to this need for a rapid functional assessment protocol, right? That turned into, well, the National Research Council defined this function this way: processes and manifestations of processes that occur in wetlands, so things that happen. Not just things that are, but things that happen. So not structure necessarily, but function. And that's easy to say, and it's really hard to get in a rapid assessment. Yet we do this anyway because the law requires it. So colleagues of mine over 20 years ago made this point. Measures of structure are easily done essentially, but basically they're just expedient and economical rather than measuring function. So that's 22 years ago, and yet we still do this. So the Corps of Engineers, the US Army Corps of Engineers, happens to be the group, for reasons that I can get into if anybody wants to know, that is one of two agencies in the United States that regulate wetlands. The US Environmental Protection Agency is the other one. They developed the hydrogeomorphic method, that's the HGM, hydrogeomorphic method for classifying wetlands and assessing function. HGM basically talks about where the water comes and how it moves through a wetland, right? Key to this is using what are known as reference wetlands. These are sites that are not impacted or minimally impacted that you build a model from and then use that model to assess other sites. It's the model that drives me crazy. So these models, basically, even though we said they had to be on function, they had to be doing something, not just being something, we generally rely on structure. They often rely on indices within indices. So if you're familiar with the phrase 6 degrees separation from reality, that gets close. And I would make the claim that you don't know what an index within an index actually means. How far can you get from the real data and understand wetland ecology or anything, right? Again, wetlands are my example, but I'm talking about ecology as a whole in terms of measuring for biodiversity. So I'm going to run you through a couple of the variables that we measure just to show you why I think this is a problem. So looking at the ability to dissipate energy, ability to store water, which is what wetlands do, right? Some wetlands do anyway. That's the function that we want. Here's the variables. First one is characteristic hydrology of the floodplain. I would challenge anybody to tell me what that means and be able to measure it. I don't know what it means. Then the next one is talking about obstruction within that area. So because you want to, obstructing water flow holds water back, and that's a good thing. But there are 3 indexes within that variable. The 3 indices by themselves added together, I don't know what that means. And then if you go down to the bottom one, you get visual estimates and percent cover. I have a paper that I sent to Faye, believe the other day, that talked about the utility or the lack of utility of using percent cover as a measure of anything. doesn't tell you anything useful, certainly in terms of function. And a lot of these visual estimates that we make are widely varying between people. So if you got one person making all the measurements, at least it's standard within that one person. If you have teams doing it, the data can be all over the place. Right? Have we measured function? What exactly have we measured? You can't tell me you know how much water is stored and how much flood water is reduced. You can pretend it you know, but based on those variables, you don't know. Another one is removal of inorganic nitrogen, right? That's what, again, some wetlands do that very well, some don't. Here you're looking at some soils and taking soil characteristics which are more indicative necessarily of hydrology rather than nitrogen. You're estimating plant biomass by visually looking at it. I don't know how you do that. And I've measured plant biomass, and you can't do it well by staring at it. And then amount of organic matter in the soil. None of this says anything directly about nitrogen dynamics. We pretend that it does, but it doesn't. So I can ask a couple questions. If you've got soil modeling, for anybody who does soil analysis, wetland soils model, they have that gray and red color. How does that relate to nitrogen? If you have a certain soil organic matter, how does that relate to nitrogen? We simply don't know. And I think this is the last one. This is maintain characteristic detrital biomass. And you're estimating coarse woody debris, you're estimating depth of the litter layer, you're estimating woody debris on the ground. You're doing this all visually. Every single one of these you could actually measure. And you could measure rather precisely. You don't have to visually estimate it, but you visually estimate it because it's faster. Right? And that doesn't tell you much. Have you measured function? I would say no. What have you measured? I don't know. That, by the way, is a wood turtle, if anybody wants to know. So my point here, for all these assessments that we do about how good or not so good an area is for whatever animal or plant we're talking about in terms of biodiversity, we need to test these indices against real life. But we don't, because it takes too much time, right? This is a paper from 20 years ago. The concepts underlying these models are poorly understood and need to be rigorously tested. That, to this day, has not happened. So for me, slow things down. Don't worry about the permit there, but slow things down. Get the actual data, understand the relationship, spend the time up front to understand what it is that you're doing and whether it relates to anything you want to know, right? These reference sites, if you can get them, I realize in an urban setting that becomes very difficult. And reduce the use of indices within indices, because it's confusing. There's no way to really relate it to realities that you know exactly what's happening. If we had put the time in to not only calibrate the models when they were built, but to actually validate the models, I wouldn't be sitting here making these complaints. But this is really important stuff when you're assessing a landscape and how you can get biodiversity back in that landscape, because you want to know what it can support. You want to know the quality of the thing, right? All this, to me, leads to a better understanding of improved biodiversity. It's very basic, it's on the ground, it's not necessarily looking at restoring a plant or an animal or anything yet. To me, this is the base of everything. Understanding that data is imperfect, and then using that imperfect data better than we do to understand how to assess a site so that we can improve things for biodiversity. So that is where I am. That's all I've got tonight.
Thank you. Thank you, Andy. So should we I guess open the let the audience actually ask questions. I mean, please direct your questions to either Andy or Ruishan. I think you're supposed to raise your hands before we call you.
It's a shy group.
Well, maybe, well, because we're supposed to have a Q&A session and have a discussion session. Maybe we can move to the discussion session to help our speakers and moderators and audience to understand some cross-scale issues. So as far as I know from Ruishan's talk, it's more about the framework in different nations, and Andy to try to help us to understand the reality of the sites, and we really need to pay attention on what we assess for and what's the real outcomes, right? I'm not sure if I understand cross-scale research in biodiversity conservation very well, but what I found is like land use planning is like something in between from the national policy level to site-based assessment level. Can each of you provide some suggestions how we can set a general goal at the framework level and make it deliver to site-based assessment? Do you have any suggestions on this? Otherwise, I will feel some policies are over general at the top and some very technique-based solutions are over site-focused. So from a learner's perspective, I really want to know how to associate them together on both sides.
I'll offer a thought here anyway. So in my title slide, I also am the director of what we call E+D, Ecology plus Design. I'm in a landscape architecture department, but I am an ecologist. And so what I would like to see for anything from large scale planning actually down to site design is if the designer proposes that something will be improved or a certain organism will be restored, I would like to propose that the obvious thing to do is to make sure that we monitor that to, that if something is claimed, that we assess it to make sure that it actually happens. Because I can't speak to anything other than what I've seen here in the United States, but we so rarely do that. Claims get made and there's no data to support the claim. Even it may be true, it may not be true, but I would like to make it a standard practice that we actually assess the claims that we make and see if we're doing what we say we do.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, I'm also happy to talk about, as Eddie talked about that, but also, nowadays we do a lot of assessment, environmental assessment. I think, nowadays we have a lot of assessment, like the IP-based assessment of biodiversity, and also, Jiao, the CBD, the Jiao, Global Environmental Outlook, and others. All these assessment they are trying to bridge the science and policy, they make the science policy interface that help, not only, we just, we can, scale up the knowledges from different places, then, all because based on these knowledges, we can make, some kind of policy, maybe we are not so policy prescriptive, but also we can make, policy relevant suggestions, that make it help, the local policymakers. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I guess I probably wasn't all that clear because I was very critical of the rapid assessments. I would be delighted if we could come up with rapid assessments that I knew were appropriate, right? That actually measured what we think we're measuring. That's a dream for me. I would love to see that. What I've seen here in the United States so far is not much in that direction.
Yeah, so that means, when we do, I think assessment, that is good because, when we do the assessment, then we can understand the knowledge gaps, where we need to do more research. Then I think that is, the benefit of why, we need to do a lot of assessment of the biodiversity and also ecosystem services.
I think
there are a couple of questions from the audience. Maybe I will just read them. Okay. I will just read them since this is a discussion. I think this question is from Franklin Fortenosa. I think he or she is interested in the question is addressed to Professor Chen. So they would like to know, he or she would like to know how the locations of the habitat gardens are being selected. Did you use a checklist of criteria? For example, if it's near a water source or along a migratory bird path, or if there's any minimum area requirement, etc. So maybe this is one part, and then I'll also include another question, which is actually related to how do you define urban biodiversity from another audience. Do we actually include the pests, the stray dogs, cats, rats, crows, cockroaches, etc.? Yeah, so maybe you could answer both questions.
Okay, great. These are all two very good questions. The first way, when we talk about how to select the habitat gardens. Yeah, at the first time we select that, they did they select the places. First, they look at, on the city level, what kind of much bigger, like the parks exist in the cities. So that is, for the big parks, that can host a lot of biodiversity. Then, we see, between these parks, what is the distance? Maybe the parks, they are too far away, and for some species like birds and also like bees, they can't cross so long distance. So we need, put some habitat, between the park, between the bigger habitat. So that is, how we select the the habitat gardens. Yeah, we also, when we do this, we also need to think about different kind of species, like the birds, how far the bird can fly, and then we also need to think about how the bees can fly, how far the bees can fly. Then we do the the overlap analysis, in the GIS, and then we select some priority areas. Then we also need to talk about with the communities. Maybe some communities, they are not interested with that. So we select the communities that are interested in that. Then we see in that community if they have enough area. As you said, the minimum area. Nowadays we do the minimum area is about 300 square meters. That is the minimum. So based on this, criteria, then we select the place. Yeah, you talk about the second question, talk about the pets, I think the pets and also pets, I think that is interesting question, Yeah, we see a lot of, especially cats, in the habitat garden. When we talk urban biodiversity, we should we include all the biodiversity within the urban area. We want to see how their interactions happens in the city. So yeah, here we include the pet and also pest, but we need to think about how we can reduce the impact of the pests, as you said, the pest weed and also the pests. So yeah, we need to reduce their impacts, and we need to have a network of biodiversity that benefits their cities. Yes, thank you.
So there's another question. Maybe Andy, could you, I'm not sure if this question is for Andy or for Professor Chen. Is that when we talked about urban biodiversity, how do we address it past issue and past ways? So Andy, could you try to answer this one?
You talking about pests again, or historic diversity? I'm not sure I understand the question.
It's in the chatting board. Could you see?
The pests, the stray dogs, the cats, the rats, the crows, all that is, yeah, okay. I'm with Professor Chen in this one. I think you have to, I mean, an urban system is its own ecosystem. And those creatures and the plants are now part of it. There's certain things that humans don't necessarily want, like disease-carrying animals, and so I think that needs to be addressed. But I think you've got to look at, you know, if the animal's there, if the plant is there, whether you like it or not, they're part of the biodiversity. And I've got to the point where I don't necessarily call plant a weed anymore. A weed is just a plant somewhere where you don't want it, right? So some of that biodiversity we may not like, cockroaches, rats, but I think we have to include everything in the calculation.
Okay.
This is yeah. So if I could actually chip in. So I think yes, I think Andy and Professor Chen both sort of brought up a really important point, which is the importance of context, right? The importance of context, and actually it does mean different thing in different places. The weed example is a great one. I think what actually more what really sort of resonates a lot with me is Andy's point towards the end about slowing down. I thought it's a great point, because often when we at least policymakers in general would want stuff or decisions or plans pretty quickly, and often it sort of goes against what at least ecologists like to do, which is collect data, lots of data. So then that begs the question of, you know, how much data is enough to inform policy at that time, right? And you know, this sort of goes into the discussion of, you know, the importance of rapid assessments, right? I mean, so that there is actually, in some ways, we are sort of always responding to needs, right? And there's a need to create habitat gardens. There's a need to create cities with protect urban biodiversity. But the question is, you know, do we actually know how much data, how much assessment is enough? And if, you know, the right way to do it would be to do something really quick, and then provide a more comprehensive monitoring system, in essence, to sort of test and see if, you know, the decisions that we made previously, do we need any modification or adjustments? So make it more adaptive, as opposed to something that is, you know, set in stone, and, you know, once the garden is up, you know, nobody's going to care about it, or you know, or like we don't monitor it, don't evaluate the success of it until much later on. So if both of you could comment on it, I think that'd be really helpful.
Sorry for interrupt. I just want to double check with Benjamin. How many minutes do we have? Because there's 3 questions come, and I need to know.
So we are supposed to end now at 10:20, but since we have few more questions, how about we extend to 10:30, 10 more minutes? Can we do that?
Okay. Yeah. So, Professor Li, do you want them to answer your questions? I mean,
yeah, I mean, they can, or we can just take the questions from the audience, because I think we have 3 really interesting questions. Yeah, we can sort of pass my questions for now, and then maybe come back to it later if that's fine. No problem.
So the first question, so please, our two presenters, could you read through the questions? The first question is to both of you, and the second question and third question is to Andy, and the fourth question is to Professor Chen. Maybe I would suggest Professor Chen to give the answer to the first question first, and then we leave the second and the third questions to Andy, and then Professor Chen come back to the question at the end. Okay. Just bear in mind
Okay.
we have about 9 minutes. Yes.
Okay, great. The question is, do we take consideration of the effect of urban heat island to urban biodiversity? The air temperature in urban cities much higher and worse than the climate change. Yeah, this is a question, when we nowadays, when we think about climate change, actually urban areas, they are like the, sentinels of climate change. So urban areas, especially the big cities, the temperature, raised very quickly all these years. They are much quicker, than other parts of the world, especially in the rural area, if you keep compare. So we can, when we examine the ecosystem change in the urban areas, so we can understand, the phenology, of the phenology change because of climate change. That may can also help us to understand if in future the climate change, how that will affect other kind of species, not only in the urban areas but also in other parts, in the rural and mountain and other areas. So yeah, I think we need to take consideration of the urban heat island in the urban biodiversity. First one is we need to think about how that will affect the urban biodiversity. Then that nowadays when the temperature increase, we have in the spring, they come early, and the winter, the autumn is later. So that means we have a long time, for the vegetation, but also sometimes we have more time, we have the flowers. Maybe someone is sensitive to the flowers, so we need, because this, urban climate change, the change of the phenology, we also need to think about how that affect the human health. I think this is a problem. And the other problem, we also need to think about, how this, when we, do the the urban planning or urban design with think about biodiversity. We also need to think about how that climate change will affect the biodiversity. Maybe, because of climate change, in future some river areas, maybe that no need to plant some vegetation, or maybe some kind of birds, maybe they are sensitive to the urban heat island, so we all need to think about how this kind of climate change affect the biodiversity in the urban areas. Yeah, so yeah, this is what we can I can understand now. Thank you.
So Andy, could you briefly provide some comments on the other two questions for you?
Sure. Right. So the first one was how strongly academic research and administration or compliance are tied, and why are there gaps like this still if the Clean Water Act has been around so long? And the reality is that the administration of the law requires a fast response, which is why it said slow down, right? And it's really difficult for anybody in academia to find the resources to do the deep dive into the data to make sure that these models are actually accurate and validated. The idea for wetland mitigation, for example, is that as long as they can show that it has water, the Corps of Engineers is probably going to say okay. And you sometimes we have a 2-3 month at most lead time to make some kind of decision, and for data that might require years to get a good number, 2 to 3 months doesn't give you much of anything. So there are people doing some of this work. It's hard to fund, and therefore it's hard to stay current with the administrative needs and permits. The second question is basically how much does this cost? And the cost is time. I can go out with, you know, probably $100 worth of equipment and and do much of this. But if I want to do it repeatedly, which I do, to make sure that the data are good, then it's time, and time again is money, and it's really hard to convince people to just slow down. I mean, that is I guess the take-home message is that we just need to stop and slow down on some of the stuff to get it right. And the way the law and the policies have been set up, we just don't have the time.
Thank you, Andy. So Professor Chen, could you kindly respond to the last one?
Yeah, talk about, you know, when we talk about ecology, we should have equilibrium in mind, how we can control the predators, invasive species, control mirrors, where people release imported invasive pets into the urban gardens parks. Yeah, this is a good question. Yeah, when we design the urban habitat gardens, you know, we use the local species. We don't import the invasive species. So this is a principle. So that means, you know, we also want to control, like as we show, you know, control. We are trying to find mirrors, you know, control the preys, you know, how, because, you know, some birds may be hurt by the cats or dogs. So we are trying to control these kind of you know, predators. So this is a question, you know, we need to think about when we talk about rewilding the urban areas, you know, rewilding the other areas. We need to think about, you know, when we bring the predators in, you know, how we can control them, not, you know, because this is not a very good system. Maybe it's a vulnerable system, you know, still. So we need some control mirrors, you know, to control the predators at other kind of places. You know, this is very important. I think, you know, about the invasive species, you know, IP-based, you know, in the International Government for Biodiversity Ecosystem Services, they already have an invasive a special assessment report about the invasive species. Inside of that, you know, they talk about, you know, some of that, you know, in the urban areas, how we can control the invasive species. Also, you know, in the habitat garden, you know, sometimes we ask the local people, you know, how they can understand the, you know, how they can see the, you know, recognize the invasive species. Then they can, you know, take the invasive species out from the habitat garden. We also have some exhibition, you know, about invasive species in the city, in the habitat gardens, and ask the local people, you know, to know about what is the invasive species, you know, in that area, you know, in that habitat. So later, you know, then when they see that, they can, you know, put that out. So this we are also trying to control the invasive species, you know, in all these habitats. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your response. But I think this audience asked one question: how do APRU play its role in introduction of foreign species? It's a very big question. I'm not sure if I'm the right person to give the answer, but I can say in our last year work at the Galapagos, currently we are trying to help local researchers and students to know how to manage introduced species, that what we're supposed to help. I also talked to Professor Ming a few days ago, right? How we can bring expertise from, sorry, because my library here is going to be closed. There's a time to close the session. So we try to introduce different experts from other universities to help the locals. That's what we're supposed to do. I think that's a very practical level we are doing. Okay, so at the end, I would represent for APRU SCL as well as working group, maybe the team we bring the webinars so far to express our great gratitude to all of the speakers and the audience today. If you're interested to know more about the programs, please check the internet. And also you can reach out to our speakers. Yes, and also our moderators, okay? Benjamin, would you close? Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, we are. Yeah. Thank you everyone for coming. So that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So it's time to log out. So see you next time. We're supposed to have another 5 webinars in the coming months. So please make sure you registered and you have the email address to receive the announcement for the new webinars when it is ready to be released. Okay. So see you. Bye-bye. Thanks for coming.
Bye bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Professor Chen.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
So you I think you can stop recording.
Yes, I will stop it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.